again. This time I will be using it with my oil pastels and once again with gouache like we did the last time. I will be using it on my Arch watercolor paper. This is the same one that we used my last gouache painting for. And as you can see, I already have the sketch drawn out on a separate scratch piece of paper, and I want to transfer this over to our final paper, which is our watercolor paper. And the way I'm doing that is I'm basically making my own tracing paper by rubbing my soft pastels onto the back. So this is basically like carbon paper, and I'm just making sure it's evenly spread out across my sketch underneath it before I just flip it over and very traditionally just tracing it on there. We just want to make sure that we're taping the sides in so it doesn't move around, but also that we're only taping in the corners so we can take a peek at the bottom to see if we're tracing it the right way. But yeah, just very old-fashioned. We're making sure we are getting every single line on there, and we're also just applying a little bit more pressure than we would normally so that we really get to see our sketch underneath. After that, I am just going over the sketch with my pencil because I will be going over the entire thing with gouache. So I want to make sure that this initial line work doesn't get drowned out. And I had this entire thing planned. Basically from the start, I knew right away the mediums that I was going to use for it and how I was going to go about it. It was just the execution, I think, that was going to be a challenge. I didn't really know how I was going to go about it, even though I knew the steps that I had to do to get there. I didn't know if I was going to be able to execute those steps. So there was a lot of excitement even at this stage where it's just preparation. There's a lot more care put into something like this, and a lot of it has to do with the paper that I'm using. It's very expensive, very thick paper, so I had to make sure that I was going to get this one right because I didn't want to waste my Arch watercolor paper. But even outside that, this just felt very special because I've been wanting to make an artwork out of this movie. This is, by the way, a painting of one of the stills from the movie, from the French movie Beauty and the Beast. It came out in 2014, and I just love the costume design and the color story they were making for the film. So I wanted to get that for this one. The main thing I had to do to make sure that I had my head in the color right from the start is to make sure that I had a very contrasting toned paper. So this is my most intense quinacridone violet from my most vibrant intense watercolors, my Mijellos. I knew I was gonna get something super bright and vibrant with this one, and I also wanted to just get a color that I think I wouldn't use normally, and also the color that would almost turn me off a little bit. So I went with this one. I knew I should have gone with red too because a lot of this painting is green, but I wanted to show a color that I wouldn't normally go for so that I'm enticed to cover it up with my soft pastels. So I went with this one. I feared that if I went with the red that I would intentionally leave some of it out because it would look too good with the green. So I went with this violet, and as you can see, it's very intense. And so it's really just gonna set the tone for the entire painting. It's gonna give us a nice clean canvas. So soft pastels out of the three mediums that we're going to be working with are the ones that we can get this nice dreamy effect with because they're the easiest to blend. So we want to start off the artwork with the soft pastels, and as you can see, I'm bringing out two of the brands that I have, or the only brands that I have, but look at how gorgeous both of these two sets look next to each other. One of them is more earthy. They're better for portraits, and then the other one has so many vibrant colors. And so I think both of them just make for a more complete set. One of them is Artix and the other one is Paul Rubens. I will be linking both of them in the description, but we're going to be using them to start off with our painting. So not only do these two colors have very different color palettes, these two sets, but they also have a very different feel to them. The Arctic set is more powdery, a little bit easier to blend, but it's a lot harder to control. So I started off with the Arctic set because it will give me more of that hazy look that I wanted for these initial colors. But most of the dark colors you will see me use will be from the Paul Rubens set. I don't know if it shows up that much, but when I use it, I can feel the difference. It's much more. It has a much different texture to it. Maybe it's just because it's the darker color, but I can really see while I'm using it. While I'm using it, that it's much more texture, and I actually kind of prefer it because it gives me more control of how I lay down my colors. But when it comes to blending them out, both of these really blend as easy as each other. This is just how they feel when you're working with them. Like the touch feel is just very different. But you can see it's so gorgeous how these two brands work with each other. And I think that's even just a soft pastel thing. I think it's just a medium that makes it just so good for these first layers that we're doing. When it comes to painting the highlights on her face is when it really starts to get exciting, at least visually for you guys to see, because the contrast between the warm highlights and the very cool violet for the underlayer is just so intense to see on film. But as you can see, there wouldn't have been that much of a contrast if I had just worked with white paper, and I think I would have neglected some of the highlights if I did that. So I was really happy that I toned the paper with my gouache. But also this is made so much easier because I'm working with so many different colors. I think soft pastels is one of those mediums where it really matters how many colors you have. It's one of those rare mediums where it's almost quantity over quality. And so I always want to give credit to the art supplies that I'm using when I'm using soft pastels, is because these colors, you wouldn't be able to get them if you had a more basic set. And I wouldn't be able to get a painting like this if I had a different set. A lot of the credit that goes into this painting is really just the exact sets that I had and how much they cater to portraits and landscape, where the Paul Rubens had a lot of colors he would use for portraits, and then the Artex set had a lot of very vibrant greens, which would be great for florals, and especially for this particular painting. I just think that a lot of the credit for this particular one really went into both of those sets. In general, soft pastels are a lot easier to work with versus other mediums, or at least other mediums that I have used. But yeah, look at how beautiful it is when we blend out these colors. And while most of the time art process videos look so much easier when we are looking at them through the videos versus just doing them, soft pastels artworks, I think, really just look as easy as they seem on video. The gouache and the oil pastels later on would be a little bit of a different story, but as you can see, it's just a gorgeous color. And for most of it, it's just the art supplies that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So as usual, I just had to make sure that I was spraying fixative in between different values. So because I wanted to reserve the highlights on her face, I just used fixative before going over the shadows with the darker colors. But as you can see, I wanted to make sure that I put in some of the greens for the shadows so it's not too different from the background. But once again, it's a very easy process because I had all of those colors to work with. It's just a dream to work with soft pastels. And again, it's one of those things where it is actually as easy as it seems on camera. So, if you guys have seen this movie, the costumes are just breathtaking. And so, I really wanted to make sure that I at least get the colors on them right. And I'm lucky that I have my Artec soft pastels to work with because it has greens. And I just realized while I was making this painting that there were almost zero greens in my Paul Rubens set. So I'm lucky to have my Artec set, but also I just wanted to use them to make her dress be as beautiful as they are on the film. So I'm using maybe 5 different greens for them and even some blues for the darker shadows, just so it brings out those greens. But yeah, the dress on here, I wanted to make sure that I at least get the colors right, because working with soft pastels, I knew I wasn't going to get the details to be as crisp as they are, and there are so many details on the dress. So I wanted to make sure that I at least honor the dress by getting the different shift in colors, if I can't go that far with the detail. So once we're done with our initial layer in soft pastels, it's now time to take out our oil pastels, and I actually have 3 sets to work with, so it's even easier than my soft pastels and I have even more colors. I'm only bringing out 2, and these sets are all arranged by color now, so I will be working with a hodgepodge of the 3 different brands, but I'm just pulling out my greens and my portrait colors. So as you can see, it's another cheat to have this many colors to work with when working with portraits, because look at how easy it is to color pick when you're working with portraits, because so much of the process really is just having that many colors to work with. It's not like other mediums like gouache where you can just mix your own colors. You kind of have to have the colors that you need. And I am saying that because I want to be realistic with the process, especially for soft pastels and oil pastels. These are both very straightforward mediums, but you kind of have to have a lot of them for them to be great. So unlike with the soft pastels where I wanted to go with a very hazy, dreamy look, with the oil pastels now I wanted to go for texture on top of that soft look with the soft pastel. So I'm working with different lines and just trying to get as much texture and also brighter values as I can. And I'm focusing a lot of it on her dress because, as I said, on the movie, her dress is just breathtaking and has a lot of jewels. It's actually sparkling in the movie, and I wanted to get that for this. And I'm again very happy and very lucky that I have all of these different colors to work with when I am with my oil pastels. So unlike with my last mixed media piece, this one I think the gouache is more like a supplementary medium where I use it to complete my painting and to get those details that I wouldn't normally be able to get with my soft pastels and oil pastels. So I am using it mostly for her face. And the thing with gouache is because you can mix your own colors, it's very different from the other two where you have to have a lot of different colors to work with. With gouache, I I just had to have 2 or 3 colors to achieve the details on her face, and I can then use those 3 colors to mix and sort of mask it against the colors that I already had on her face. My goal with the gouache is to get detail with it, but to not have it have its own look. I just want it to look like it's only a soft pastels and an oil pastel artwork. So a lot of the time I was working with the gouache was spent mixing my colors and matching them to look exactly like the ones we used with the soft pastels and the oil pastels. Just very sneakily using it to clean up our sketch and also adding details that I wouldn't normally be able to achieve with both of those mediums. So after that, I just go back and forth between the two. Mostly I use the gouache and the oil pastels around this time because the soft pastels was more for the initial part where it had this dreamy look, and then to build up the structure of the painting I actually needed the gouache and the oil pastels for that. But I didn't want to erase the look of the soft pastels completely. So while I am going back and forth between the gouache and the oil pastels, I do once in a while take a step back and pick up my soft pastels and just randomly add those softer areas of highlight with them. Like a lot of the yellows and the warmer colors, I use soft pastels for those because they're very easy to blend and they're not really the main color of the painting, but they will bring everything together and break apart the bigger shapes that we made with the greens and the darker blues. But after that, it's really just gonna be me jumping back and forth between those mediums. I think it's so much fun to see the end parts where we're polishing up the details and we're adding texture, and we're able to look back at our painting and take a step back and try to see what it's missing and what kind of textures I can have fun with now that we already have the entire baseline of our painting done and we can just have fun with it. That I think is the most fun part of the entire process. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this one, and thank you to my patrons for supporting me. Thank you again for making it through the end, and I will be seeing you guys again soon.